I'm John Whiteside, and Roxy came by the farmers. Rushi?
Yeah, we've just been communicating mostly through email, but yeah. So I kept on going to these farmers markets, and I'm a fourth year, so I've been going to farmers markets for a while, and Wolf Creek Farms has always been like a staple in the farmers market, so I decided one day to kind of approach John and hear his perspective, and I had a professor who really admired his work, Professor Damon, and talked about him at length in class. And so I thought it was a great way to learn a little bit more about sustainability, about farming. And I had done an independent study last semester on dairy milk in America, so that's kind of what drew me into cattle. And I wanted to hear his perspective, and to be honest, I'm kind of a novice in this sector, and so I'm kind of like greedily, nerdily absorbing all the information alongside you guys. So it'll be a great kind of presentation, and then we'll leave, of course, ample amounts of room for discussion. And if you guys can, and this is going at length to what's going to happen later on in the seminar, but as we kind of continue on to discussion, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, if you have a comment, I highly recommend kind of introducing yourself first, giving a little bit of background as to why or what drew you to the seminar, and then continuing on with your comment. But yeah, if there's no questions, I'll hand it over to John.
Great. So we've got, I guess, about an hour of people's time. I'll try to keep my comments brief in the beginning and then open it up to questions. And I'll probably make more assertions than are allowed. And so mark them down if you think they're wrong or you have further questions, and we'll handle that in an open Q&A. But Fred Damon, who's a professor of anthropology, and I have debated for years what's the role of agriculture in the society. And I come from a very different background, technology and business, and so it's farming for me actually has become what I think is the solution to a lot of the problems that I helped create as a businessman and a technologist in an earlier life. So let me, if I can work the technology here, it's been a while. Which one do I have to hit?
Go to the right.
This one. Return. Oh, I'm going to turn it on. Absolutely.
Is this screen? Yeah, you can take this screen.
Go forward here.
I think it's
It's on keyboard. That's simple. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about is sustainable agriculture and juxtapose it with what I call industrial ag, big pharma ag. And obviously I'm biased. I clearly believe that sustainable agriculture is the future. But we'll juxtapose the two and talk about what it's going to take to fix the system that we've got today. So our challenge right now is that the current system is unsustainable. Industrial agriculture is destroying the environment. It's creating food, stuff that's called food, processed product that is incredibly unhealthy, and it's destroyed the local economies and infrastructure throughout America and across the world. So we've got to do something that's different. The problem that we've got is exacerbated by the population explosion. So one of the reasons we got into the mess we got into was people said we need industrial agriculture to feed the growing population of the world. And the population just keeps growing. We've removed the non-artificial constraints on population growth and created a false sense of fertility in the world that's not backed up by a natural system of fertility to support it. And we've just about reached a critical decision where if we don't make a decision on a global basis and start changing the way that we're driving agriculture, we're going to reach a point where we can't change it. So we really have three options. We can either accelerate the green revolution, which started when I was your age. In the 60s, we had this marvelous thing that we thought was going to save the world, which was the green revolution. Essentially, Liebig, great name for a fellow that did what he did, introduced the concept of converting petroleum products into nitrogen products or chemical fertilizers. And through that was able to take what was a somewhat moribund agriculture system that had its first spurt when the English Empire, the British Empire, had gone out and taken fertility from guano and other animal manures and brought those to the UK to remineralize their soils and kickstart their soils. And that had run its course. We were out of it. Agriculture was starting to fall off. We couldn't support the global population. Along came World War II. Along came all of this ammunitions manufacturing capability. And from that, when we got to peacetime, the dividend we got was we could convert all of that to producing nitrogenous chemical fertilizers, hence the explosion of the green revolution in the 50s and 60s. And what we've heard in the more recent form of the green revolution is that we need to genetically modify the plants on the planet in order to support the population that we're growing. That we need plants that will use less of the herbicides, pesticides, and chemical fertilizers if we're going to save the planet. And despite the fact that that claim from Monsanto and others has been debunked with data, we're actually using an order of magnitude more of all of those things after GMOs than we did before. They continue to double down on that claim. And they also claim that they need patent protection on all that R&D in order to keep spending the huge amounts of money that they spend. Really what that does is it's a mechanism for forcing farmers to embrace what they're doing as they've patented life. So a farmer can't farm unless he buys a patent from the person that owns it. And through that, they've further driven, we were talking earlier about what happened under Earl Butz in the Nixon administration, the concept that you have to get big or get out. We have really specialized our farming, gone to monocultures, and gone to an extractive form of farming, which is essentially nothing other than mining. We're taking, as we'll see in some of the later discussion, we're taking the mineral heritage of our country, and I'll focus just on the US, in our soils, and we're mining those just like any other extractive industry, and we're selling that in the form of the harvest that we take off the land, a lot of which we're using to drive global trade. And so we're selling our heritage to win a global trade war. And through this increase in the size and specialization and extraction industry, we've specialized the farms, we've concentrated the markets, and we've now disintermediated the farmer from the consumer. And we've put in between them a processor. And all of the food or things that are being grown by farmers are now commodities. They're not food. And they're sold to processors, not consumers. And then they're processed into something that is food-like, that sits in the center aisle of the supermarket and is 93% marketing and cardboard and 7% actual food. And through that concentration then comes the ability to form cartels and have the clout and the power to control. And if you look in my industry, the beef industry, 3 companies control 85% of the global beef trade. So it's no longer federal governments that are controlling any of this. It's the big cartels that have allegiance to no country. And the trade has become global. There is no longer a sovereign local market, whether it's a federal, state, or true community market. And as a result, local sovereignty is on the decline. I'd argue it's gone. There is no local sovereignty as a result of what's happened in our food industry. So we can either double down and continue that green revolution with the next version of it, which is going to be even more technology, more genetic modification, and more fixes on the back end. For example, in the beef industry, don't fix the health of the animal on the front end, just irradiate the beef and spray antimicrobials on it on the back end, and have a really good recall infrastructure so that you can, every time you screw up, recall thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds of beef because it's tainted. Another option would be basically what it appears we're doing around the globe, which is to maintain the status quo, to not fully embrace GMO, but tolerate the green revolution as it's being developed. And so you see this around the world where people are suing Monsanto outside of the US, not so much because they think they can stop GMOs, but at least they can get multiple different companies that are doing it, so there'll be some competition and maybe still some sovereign strength in individual countries. And they're looking to support the regional agribusiness infrastructure through subsidies, through all kinds of export-import, bilateral and trilateral deals in agriculture. Every time you turn on the TV or pick up a newspaper, I guess neither one of those are the ways you get your news anymore. Every time you read a blog, it's about some other country having done a trade deal with the US and opened up a beef market, or opened up a corn market, or opened up something else. And expand the role of global governance to make sure that there is some entity there that can clean up the messes when they happen. So if we have a massive famine in one country, the United Nations will rush in and fix it for us. This appears to be under the global fair trade banner where most countries in the world, most political and corporate entities are headed. A third option, so that what I call punting really is the status quo. A third is to return to the traditional mixed farming agriculture, which is, I believe, revolutionary and is the only way we can actually fix this. It's environmentally sustainable. It takes the soil, which is the birth of all life, and it balances it, maintains it, and creates a virtuous cycle of nutrients locally in the soil and in the community where the product from that soil is consumed. It's economically sound because it produces for the local economy dollars that stay in the local economy and that circulate in the local economy. One of the questions that I'm continuously asked at the farmers market is, do you take credit cards? And I say, not only do we not take credit cards, but you should stop using credit cards. If you think about it, a farmer, like a beef farmer like me, works for 2 years to raise an animal to get it to harvest weight. It takes me 2 years of 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, checking on cows, checking on heifers that are having first-time calves, mending fence, hauling hay, doing all the things you do on a farm to raise an animal to harvest weight. And the margin on the average farm, good, well-run farm, is less than 5%. So for 2 years worth of work, I'm going to get 5%. And I'm going to give 3.5% of that 5% to a bank that has its operations in Bangladesh for doing nothing. And as a consumer, by using your credit card, you're actually stimulating and promoting that. So buying product at a farmer's market with a credit card is, in my mind, no different than going to Walmart and buying labeled organic vegetables that come from a factory farm in Sausalito and are farmed with immigrant slave labor. So we don't accept credit cards, and that's part of making it socially just. The farm, as a part of the local economy, provides good labor, good work for people who live in the local economy. It provides healthy food for all those that aren't raising their own food. It promotes the healthy environment that's good for all of us, carbon sequestration, water retention, all the things we'll talk about in a minute. And so my view is this is the only way we can go forward, is to return to traditional mixed-use farming, family farming. At the heart of the environmental sustainability of any farm is the soil. If you think about it from a human health standpoint, all of you are made up 95% of 4 elements: nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. And those come from air and water. So you're 95% air and water. You're 5% made up of minerals. And those minerals come from the soil. And those minerals control everything about you. It's all of your endocrine system, all of your brain function, everything that's going on in your body, your immune system, your reproductive system, all of the organization and control of your life is coming from the elements. And the elements come into you through what you eat. And the closer you eat to the soil, the better off you're going to be in terms of your gut health and your body health. But if the soil is destroyed, eating close to the soil isn't going to do anything for you. So what we're doing with with conventional agriculture is we are literally mining the soil, depleting the minerals, and propping the soil up with artificial chemicals, using the soil as a substrate to hold the plant erect, and a medium into which to pump chemicals. It's no different than hydroponics, the way we're farming in soil today. The alternative, which is sustainable agriculture, says the soil is living. Let's keep it alive. And let's remineralize the soil to add back those minerals that have been depleted over time through erosion or through transpiration or just poor farming. Get it into balance, and then maintain that balance through a nutrient cycle. So if you put cattle, herbivores on land, they'll do 2 things. They'll scuff the surface and keep the surface alive. And they'll eat the plant and deposit dung and urine to stimulate the growth of the plant and to fertilize the soil. So if we focus on maintaining the soils and making the soils nutrient dense, the foods that will come out of the soil will be nutrient dense and will be healthy. If you look at the argument against that, the primary one is economics, which says, oh, you can't afford to do that. Well, if you look back 2 generations ago, we spent, of our gross income, 30% on food, and we spent less than 5% on medicine and healthcare. 1 generation ago, the numbers had narrowed. We spent about 20% on food and about 5 to 10% on medicine. Today, we're spending less than 5% on food, and we're spending almost 25% on all forms of medicine and medical. So what we're doing is we're shorting ourselves, we're poisoning ourselves by eating processed food, and then we're surprised that we have a runaway bill for trying to get ourselves healthy again. And the modern diseases are not diseases of bacterial or fungal or viral infection. They're diseases of lack of nutrition. And nature abhors a vacuum. And all that disease is a way of nature going in and cleaning out what is weak and what needs to be gone. So if you want your fields, your pastures to be strong, you don't put chemicals on them to kill the bacteria and to kill the fungus and to kill the pests that are eating them. That's nature's vulture. They're out there cleaning up the mess that you made. No, you've got to remineralize the soil, get high bricks or sucrose content into the grasses, and they will survive and they'll grow and they'll thrive. And then you won't need herbicides and pesticides and you won't need the rescue chemistry of modern agriculture. Likewise, if you're eating that grass by passing it through a ruminant and eating the protein from that ruminant, you won't need to spend all that money on rescue chemistry to get your gut health back, to get antibiotics to kill bacteria, to kill fungi, and so forth. Fred Damon just sent me an article which I've skimmed but haven't read yet, and I don't know that, I can't vouch for its authenticity, but there is a theory being put forward out of Western Africa right now, which is the monocultures that have been introduced for palm oil to produce biodiesel have so disrupted the societal structures and the farming structure that it has given rise to the ability for Ebola to not run its course quickly. And that part of the problem that they're having right now, the reason it's getting so bad is in part due to the fact that they've totally changed their societal structures and their agricultural methods over the course of the last 20 years. And it will be interesting to see if that in fact bears out, that monocultures have played a big role in creating a bigger problem from what is a naturally occurring. They've had Ebola forever, but it runs its course, and as with all populations, it wipes out the weakest, and then the population, the rains come, and the population survives. So fixing the soil is the key to any farm. And once you've fixed the soil, you've also solved some of your water problems, because for every 1% increase in humus content of the soil, the carbon of the soil, you've increased your water retention capacity on your acreage by 1,000 gallons per acre. So one of the ways that I can become drought tolerant is to get the organic content in my soils higher. By getting the organic content in the soils higher, I save water. By saving water, I now have more water for the root structure, which grows more grass. By having animals on that grass that I'm managing intensive rotational grazing, I can produce more grass by stressing the grass to just the right point where it wants to regrow. And finally, the sun is the only truly renewable source of energy we have on the planet. And the best way to utilize the sun is not a solar panel to drive our iPad. It's a solar panel to drive photosynthesis, which creates plant matter, which then can be passed through an herbivore to create a combination of products, proteins and manures, which we can use to keep that cycle going and to feed our population sustainably. So grass farming, I believe, is the solution to a lot of our problems, to desertification around the globe. We go back to grass farming and we'll get rid of the encroachment of deserts around the world. Healthy and stable soils, you monitor them through soil samples and then amend them, balance them, and then keep a cycle that's consistent. Maintain closed loops. One of the biggest problems we have as we've moved from rural society to urban society, a conscious objective of our federal government was, after World War II, to move labor from the farm where they thought it was unnecessary and dumb, and move it to the city where it was needed for manufacturing to create a consumer society. We pulled all of the ability to cycle nutrients locally and broke the system. If you think about a city, what a city does is it imports nutrients from farms far around, pulls those nutrients into the city, passes them through a human body, and guess where they end up? In a sewage treatment plant. And in the sewage treatment plant, they're mixed with toxins, heavy metals from industry and from humans' use of antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals, and both recreational and medicinal, and creates a slurry of heavy metal and toxic waste. And so now what the cities want to do, because they figured out, boy, this cycle is broken and it doesn't work, is we need to get rid of this stuff because it's building up in the cities. So they're coming to the dumb farmers and they're saying, hey, why don't you take this and spread this on your fields? And the farmers are saying, no, I don't think I want all those heavy metals. We'll tell you what, we'll make it a little bit better for you. We'll pay you to do it. We'll put in fences for you, we'll put in gates, we'll put in crossings on rivers, and we'll spread it, it's free. So farmers are doing that. So guess what we're doing? We're going back to soils that we have depleted, and we're now going to poison them with toxic waste. All because we don't have a closed loop system in small rural economies anymore. We have a huge industrial urban complex that wants a depopulated rural environment from which they can extract all the minerals that they need and dump all the waste they don't want. You need diverse, so clean and abundant water. By fencing animals out of the water and by growing the organic content in your soil, you can maintain water. So one of the big challenges in farming today is we use way too much water. Well, it's because of the way we farm. And ruminants can actually help us preserve our water, sequester carbon, and get, somebody is very persistent on that. So by fencing out the streams and by growing the humus in your soil, you can maintain that water. Growing diverse and dense grasses by growing a mixture of perennials and annuals and all different types of grasses, so that you have a salad that's out in the fields 365 days a year. You can grow more, you can harness more energy from the sun, you can produce more food for your cattle, you can grow more protein for human consumption. And so this is what a cow should look like. And anyone who's seen any of the documentaries on cattle knows that's not the way most cattle live in this country. 99% of the cattle in this country are finished in feedlots. So they're grown on their mother, they spend 6 months on their mother, they're weaned, and then they're sent into a feedlot. And they're called grass-fed because the USDA has conspired with the beef industry to say, hey, we finished them in 14 months. They eat a little bit of hay when they're in the feedlot. They ate only hay and milk when they were on their mother, so guess what? More than 50% of their diet over their life is grass, therefore they're grass-fed. This is what cattle should look like. One of the reasons people don't farm anymore is it's a lot of work. To take care of animals is a lot of work. But it used to be, when I was growing up, work was play. And we didn't try to avoid work because that's how we had fun. Working was a sense of fulfillment, of purpose, and unfortunately, my generation has created this concept for your generation, which is work is to be avoided. Free time, recreation, spend money, consume, and you'll be happy. In fact, as many studies have shown, the harder people work physically and the more hours they work, the happier they are, which is the exact opposite of what we're all taught in a consumer society. So if you get your soils right, get your farm right, you've got to have, the next thing is healthy animals. The first thing, you need a closed herd. You've got to control the genetics. You can't be bringing in things from all over the place. Very few farms in the country anymore exercise a closed herd mentality. If you look at the most recent announcements on the radio of Wegmans coming to town, and they're going to have grass-fed natural beef from Madison County, where I'm from. Well, guess what? All that beef is coming from the sale barn. It's cattle that are sold, random cattle sold into the sale barn, bought by another guy, aggregated and put into a feedlot. Happens to be in Madison. And Wegmans can say we're doing local, sustainable, grass-fed, natural beef. You need sound genetics. Cattle were genetically modified from dwarf mammoths millennia ago, and man manipulated them to give what we wanted, which was milk and meat. And depending on the geography that you were in, the British Isles, Europe, or meridian, you're down in the tropics, you had different grasses, different soils, and therefore the genetics that you selected were different, which is why we have British breeds, we have continental breeds, and we have the Indicus and Brahmin and other tropical breeds, which are all adapted to their specific soil and their specific grasses. You can't take genetics from one and put them in another area and expect them to thrive. We use British breeds because that's the kind of soil and climate we have here in Virginia. So we have Red Devons and Aberdeen Angus. Vigilant animal husbandry, it takes a lot of time. One of the reasons we have industrial agriculture is because we don't want any labor. Take all the labor out and pump the animals full of antibiotics, and you don't really have to watch them. Well, if you're going to farm sustainably, you have to look at your animals every day. And if they start to look bad, you isolate them and you figure out why. No antibiotics or hormones. You shouldn't be eating things that are laced with antibiotics, nor should you be consuming things that have artificial hormones in them. We give animals antibiotics routinely in feedlots for two reasons. One is to promote growth. It's been proven that as you eat antibiotics, you will lay down more tissue and fat. The other reason is because you've put an animal with 10,000 of its nearest and dearest friends. It's like putting 10,000 children in a daycare center and locking them in a room and having them eat and sleep on top of a pile that happens to be what they produced the day before. It doesn't work well. And healthy animals are grown on pastures, not in confined animal feeding operations. And they're not meant to eat grain. One of the major things that we've done in the cattle industry to save money, to get there fast, to save labor, is we've confined animals and fed them grain. A ruminant has 4 stomachs, it's 4 fermentation tanks, and it's meant to eat grass. That's it. It doesn't eat grain. If you feed it grain, you acidify the rumen. You change the gut health of that animal. It will grow quickly because it's like carb loading. You're going to pump it full of Wonder Bread, it's going to get fat. And it's going to get fat in a hurry. But it's going to die. And so 2 things you do. You pump it full of antibiotics because you're in a race to get fat or die, and you want to stay alive until you kill it yourself rather than having it die in the feedlot. So you pump it full of antibiotics, and guess what you've done? You've just created a petri dish for growing antibiotic-resistant E. coli. If you think about it, if you harvest an animal, whether it's a deer in the field or a cattle, and you make a mess of it, and you get the offal, the guts, on the beef, you're going to get E. coli and other things from the gut into the beef. If you eat tainted beef that's grown grass-fed on natural soil, you'll get a little bit sick, but you're not going to die because your gut pH is more acidic than its gut. So the E. coli that lives in its gut can't survive in yours. You will kill the E. coli. But if you fed that animal corn, you acidified its stomach, guess what? The E. coli that lives in its stomach can now survive in your gut. And you pumped it full of antibiotics, so it's now antibiotic resistant. It's a superbug that can live in your gut and that we can't treat. That's why we have problems. Mad cow came from eating cows' brains to cows. Cannibalism in the feedlot created BSE, or mad cow. You cannot get mad cow from grass-fed beef. The problems that we have in the system we created by not having healthy animals. These are 2 examples of heifers. So these are yearlings, a Devon and an Angus, getting ready to become cows. And once they have their first calf, they graduate from heifers to cows. We give them more jewelry. They get their yellow tag, their calf tag goes, and they get their red, 2 red cow tags. And 50% of the genetics obviously comes from the bull line. And so one of the things we look for are traditional hardened grass bulls. Bulls that never eat any grain and are healthy because they grew solely on grass. And it sounds harsh, but the way you do that is anyone that can't make it on grass becomes a burger. And if he's going to be a good bull, then he'll stay and he'll breed and service the herd. So if you've got sustainable agriculture and you've got healthy animals, you can produce nutrient-dense beef. But you've also got to have gentle handling. So you've got to handle your animals differently than the way our industrial agriculture system does. Once an animal gets excited, its adrenaline goes up. Once its adrenaline goes up, that gets into its beef. You eat a piece of beef from an excited animal, you're eating adrenaline. It's not what you want to be eating. So a key is to find, and a question earlier was which slaughterhouse do we use? You want to find an artisan, a person that's doing it on a small scale with skill, and they do everything from the kill to the hanging to dry age to the processing, the butchering. And all of that infrastructure used to be in every town. Every town had a slaughterhouse, a small abattoir, and multiple butchers. But the industrial agriculture system has eliminated that, destroyed the abattoirs, they're out of business, consolidated the industry into 3 companies that control the feedlots and the slaughterhouses. The slaughterhouses are doing thousands of animals a day, and they're commingling the meat. So when you get a recall, the reason is because the average burger in a fast food restaurant today has DNA from over 1,000 animals in it. All you need is one bad animal, or one animal processed poorly, and you're going to have a problem in that whole batch. And that's why we keep getting these recalls. So what's the solution in industrial ag? Irradiate the beef and spray antimicrobials on it. Don't fix the front of the problem, just deal with it on the back end, and then recall it if it gets bad. They also, because they're in such a hurry, they wet age all their beef instead of dry aging. Dry aging is the traditional way of hanging a carcass in a cool room, humidity controlled. The enzymes in the beef will naturally break down the connective tissue and pull the nutrients into the muscle, the fats into the muscle, and you want the fats. Fats are good. Saturated animal fats are the most healthy thing you can eat. Butter is great for you, margarine is bad for you, and you know you've got enough butter on a piece of toast when you can leave teeth marks. And that will produce beef that has high omega-3 fatty acids to low omega-6, all the conjugated linoleic acids, vitamin E, and all the other complex amino acids that you can't create yourself, that you need a ruminant to create for you. Which is another issue, which is a lot of people have shied away from animal protein diets and become vegans, in part because the protein is so dirty. And that's true, and that's a reason to be a vegan. But the problem with that is you can't get the complex amino acids that you need from a soybean. And that's why most vegans have to take supplements. So they're chemically treating their body to make up for the nutrient lack from the soil and the animal that they're not eating. Let me power through this quickly. So basically, if we're going to follow the revolutionary course of going to sustainable family, mixed family farming again, we're going to need a totally different economic model, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. To make this economically sustainable is very difficult. I'll just use one set of numbers to prove this. It takes 3 acres to carry a cow for a year with her calf. It takes 3 more acres for another year to bring that steer to harvest weight. So 6 acre years to produce 1 animal's worth of beef. If an acre of land in Albemarle County is $10,000 an acre, you've got $60,000 of capital tied up for a year. If your cost of capital is 5%, you've got $3,000 just to pay for the land. You can't sell the beef for $3,000. You haven't paid the first farmhand, you haven't built the first fence, you haven't made the first bale of hay, you haven't bought a cow, you haven't bought a tractor, you haven't done anything. You can't make it. So we need to fundamentally change the economic model to make this work. And we need to view soil as a long-term investment. this whole climate change debate that people are having, no one can argue that we've polluted our environment, and no one can argue that we've depleted our soils. So forget where you're coming from in terms of ideology and politics and all the rest of it. Let's just clean up the mess we have, and let's remineralize our soils, and let's do whatever it takes to do those things, because that's the future of mankind. Every society that has ever failed in the world has, as a precursor, has had its soils fail. So if you look at every empire in history that's collapsed, it's because its soil collapsed. Great Britain collapsed its soil, and it prolonged its life by getting a navy and going and stealing soil from everywhere else. And so they prolonged it until even that wore out. China right now is trying the same thing. So if you look at the most recent acquisition of Smithfield Ham by China, and you say, oh, they're getting into our business and they want to sell us food. No, it's very simple. They want our soil. They don't have the highly mineralized soil. They don't have the water that we do. And so what they're doing is very smart. They're buying American production. They're getting us to produce the pigs using our soil. And then we're going to export our minerals to China in the form of carcasses. And they're going to leave behind the slurry of toxic waste in the lagoons of our industrial pork agriculture system. And our government supports that. And our capitalists support that. So something's wrong when another empire, the Chinese empire, has figured out how to play these stupid capitalists called Americans and steal their soil, or get them to give it to them. They didn't steal it, they paid for it. But it was cheaper for them to buy Smithfield than it was to raise pork in China. I think I've covered all this. So how do you get started, and how do you know that what you're doing is right? Certifications mean nothing. The US government has gotten together with big industry and has certified everything, whether it's organic or natural or sustainable or grass-fed. You can get big beef operators that claim to be natural, sustainable, grass-fed because they have the USDA seal that says so. It doesn't mean anything other than the fact that they have the lobbyists to buy the to capture the USDA. The two certifications that mean something are free. The American Grass-Fed Association comes in and certifies that your farm in fact is grass-fed and that it is a family farm and not an industrial ag farm. Animal Welfare Approved, which I brought some brochures here, certifies that not only are you raising your animals ethically without hormones and antibiotics and all the rest, but that the final day of their life, the one bad day they have, is as good as it can be. That your abattoir is certified as well. So one of the things I had to do was get my abattoir certified by Animal Welfare Approved so that I can put the label on my product that says it's Animal Welfare Approved, it's American Grass-Fed Association. But really the only way you can know is by educating yourself and knowing your farmer. You go talk to your farmer and you find out how they're farming. And the key is if you want to make a difference. I started in this business by accident. I loved the outdoors, I was an environmentalist, but I was in business. And so I'd give money to the Sierra Club, I'd give money to Natural Defense Fund and so forth, thinking that I was doing the right thing. But in reality, I really wasn't committing to it and making a difference. Our society our culture and our economy is 70% consumer spending driven. We're a consumer society. So the only way you can really change something is to change your consumption. Giving money to Sierra Club is really, I think, back in that second category of the punting. It's trying to contain the problem. It's at least not promoting GMO, so it's not doubling down on the green revolution. But if you really want to make a difference, it's to buy local, grass-fed, natural food. support your farmer. And it's not more expensive. It is for you personally, because you're paying for all the work that farmer's doing to not pollute the environment. The reason food is cheap is because we've taken all those costs out and externalized them, and someone else is going to bear the brunt of that. So really what you need to do is get to know your farmer. Go to your farmer's market, visit the farms, get to know the people, ask them what they're doing. And then ultimately, if you really feel driven, is you get into farming. And it's really hard to get into farming because it's very capital intensive. You've got to start with vegetables and work your way up to protein. You can't start with protein. It's just too much capital. So I've rambled too long. Let me stop and ask if there are questions or discussion or radical disagreement on any of this. Yeah.
So my name is Andy Boyer. I'm a student here in the second year. I take a couple classes on food policy, and friends with Will and Zeke here both run an organization called Green's the Ground. I'm sure you're aware of. My biggest question is how to close that loop that you're talking about and stop cities from stealing the proteins of the depopulated country, as you said, because I don't ever see that stopping. You know, I don't see cities depopulated.
So there's three ways to do it. Either through government edict, okay, and the government created the problem, so why should we ask the government to fix it? They'll just screw up some other way and create unintended consequences somewhere else. So I have absolutely no faith in the government to do anything right. In fact, the USDA calls me and asks me what can we do to help, and I say close, go out of business. So that's one way, it's the government. I don't believe that'll happen. The other is business, capitalists, and I don't believe that's going to happen because there's too much easy money to be made other ways servicing what the government has set up. So I don't think we can count on big corporations to fix this. They'll put window dressing on it so that they can sell product. Hey, we're sustainable, we're organic, we're Starbucks. It's not going to happen. The only way to fix this problem is from the bottom up, locally. And I believe the system will fall before we fix it. So all I'm trying to do, and all I think we can do, is make sure there's enough still out there that's good, that when the stuff hits the fan and when the system collapses, there will still be something there that works. I think you're going to have, just as we're seeing in lots of other places around the world, where the urban blight is collapsing in Africa, that is going to happen. It is happening here. I mean, look at Detroit. Now that didn't happen because of food, that happened because of industry and government. But I don't think you fix the problem. So to reverse it, I don't think you can reverse it. You've got to let that go its course and hope that you've converted enough people and created. Charlottesville is a perfect petri dish for this. I submit that all of the good institution from a learning standpoint, so a university town that's got land around it, got a rural environment around it, is where this is going to happen. And it's already, I started, as I say, by accident in this business about 25 years ago. And really in the last 5 years, I've seen it's gone through that early adopter phase. It's now it's going. And so I think it's happening, but we've got to keep driving it on a local level and not look for a national solution. There is none.
I've got a tangentially related follow-up on what's going to go first. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had you mentioned briefly hydroponics, and I just had a question about what your opinion on aquaponic systems and then other systems that use biomimicry to sort of produce food, especially ones like, see companies like Gotham Greens, this whole ideologies to to like feed New York City from New York City. Do you see any sort of like urban farming as a way to mitigate the demand that cities are placing on sort of
I think urban people that eat from urban farms deserve what they get, and I think it's great food for them. Hydroponics, think about this. You're taking a substrate, water, and you're injecting it with chemicals to fake out something to believe that it should be grown. It's not at all, it's not natural. Without the incredible inputs of man, it wouldn't work. Now, the only reason that we even try it is we say, oh, we ran out of land. Well, we didn't run out of land. The Europeans came to the US and they farmed the first couple of states, mined those out, and moved to the next few states and kept mining as they went west. And so now all of a sudden we've got to have hydroponics because we've not only mined the soil, but we've tarmacked everything and built these huge. If you look at fish, same issue. We so destroy the oceans, not just by overfishing, that was a big part of it, just as it was the buffalo, killing all the buffalo, but more importantly, it was destroying the actual water and destroying the soil and the prairies that killed the buffalo. So what we're now trying to do to fix that problem is not fix the ocean, is we're going to try to grow tilapia literally in chicken shit. And that's what we're feeding. So no, I think hydroponics, I think all of these growing algae to create energy is a fool's errand. If anyone that's studied an entropy curve knows that it takes more energy in than you're getting out, and the only reason it works is because somebody is subsidizing the energy going in. The energy coming out is lesser. So there is no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. And on food, if you're pumping all these chemicals in on the front end, what you're getting out the back end is not very good. It's not nutrient dense, it's not natural. So, you know, I totally think hydroponics are really, really bad. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I really appreciate what you do and all the other market vendors on Saturday. But one of my questions is, so we talk a lot, I think, in the local food movement about consumers being able to enact change just by changing what they're purchasing. But another aspect of local food movement is that the previous system hasn't worked. The free trade hands-off has led to these giant corporations or capitalist solutions that aren't going to work. So how do you reconcile these two things? One, supportive of consumers enacting change, but also a system that's flawed.
Yeah, I don't, it's somewhat related to the answer to the other question. I don't think you can fix the current capitalist consumer society system and tweak that. I think you actually have to recreate an old homestead system, a local agriculture and eating system. We've broken a lot of different things in the process. We broke the abattoirs, we broke the butchers, we broke all the distribution of food from farm to table. But almost as importantly, we broke the ability to cook and prepare food. If you talk to most people today, they don't know how to cook. They go to the supermarket and the stuff in the middle of the supermarket is what they get because there are directions on the box on how to mix something and put it in a microwave. Going and finding something that is raw, that needs to be cooked and prepared or fermented or whatever, they don't know how to do that. So I think the solution is changing consumptive behavior on food first by changing the way we prepare food and the way we eat food. We don't eat around a table anymore and have a dinner. Everything is on the go. Everything is fast food or a Heath bar or not a Heath bar, a health bar or some other form of non-food. So I think in addition to farmers needing to produce real food, we need a movement that reintroduces preparing real food and homesteading, running a house. And I know it's politically totally incorrect to say this, But when I was in school, all the girls went through home economics, and they learned the nutrient value of foods and how to prepare them. And they studied Mrs. Beeton's, which was the time-old honored British cookbook on how you kept people healthy. And if you look at most other cultures, Asian cultures still have a close affinity with their foods. We've lost it here. The American culture doesn't have it, I mean, unless you go into those pockets we've lost it. And we did it, I think, with good intention, saying, you know, a woman shouldn't be barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. But as a result of that, we lost a whole generation, and now we've broken the link between grandmothers, mothers, and daughters to pass along that heritage. You almost have to go back and recreate it. A great organization for that is the Weston A. Price Foundation and Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, which a lot of my customers are homeschooling people who believe that the most important thing they can do is raise children. And they want to feed them nutrient-dense food, so they figured out their mother didn't cook, and they weren't taught how to cook, but they've learned it. So I think you have to fix that. You have to fix the societal concept of food as fuel versus food as a social event. The preparation of food, the eating of food, the gathering around the table. And that's a cultural thing, and I think because we've lost that cultural connection through this polyglot or just hybridization in the US, it's going to be hard. Really hard. And it's politically totally, it's not politically correct to even talk about it. Women can talk about it, but men can't. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very interesting case. And in your discussion about those elements, I think you didn't put in the labor. And just like what you just mentioned about the cooking and the rearing of animals, my experience from China is that we spend a lot of labor.
Yes.
Because labor relatively compared with American is cheaper. So we have to spend a lot of time to prepare food, to hear the cattle, to do a lot of things based on agricultural lifestyle.
Right.
So if you want to change the whole economic system here, what is the cost of your labor, and whether the society can accept it? If American society can accept it, I think the world will be better.
Yeah, so the only way the American society will accept it is when we don't have any choice. And your generation is going to be the first generation that does not live as well as your parents lived. And the reason, now you may individually be in a situation where you do, but as a group, millennials are not going to live as well as their parents because we have been overly consumptive. We've driven the labor out of things through automation, and we've raped and pillaged. We've pulled everything we can out of the system in an unsustainable fashion. So you're going to be forced to figure that out and to go back. And I think actually when you stop viewing physical labor, again, politically incorrect, but when my wife and her friends are in the kitchen talking and preparing things all day, making kimchi, making bulgogi, doing the things that they do, that's life. They're having a great time. When I'm out mending fence, I'm not making capital, I'm not making money, I'm living. So I won't do that if it's much easier for me to go and be a consultant or an investment banker or a merchant banker and make a lot of money and be able to buy a weekend place and hire a guy to do that for me, and I just go out and fly fish. But those days are over. That's not, I mean, a few people will still be able to do that. And they're probably going to be Chinese. They're not going to be Americans, because the guys with the real money aren't Americans anymore. They're the oligarchs in China and in Russia. So when Americans wake up and realize that they're no longer the big guy on the block, and that they're no longer going to this field of this country of dreams, it's no longer going to be better than it was when their parents were alive. I think that's going to force us to go back. And fortunately, we have more natural resources, better land, better soil, better water than any other country. So if we figure it out before we've destroyed it, there's a chance we can come back. But I agree with you, it's not going to...
So I think the problems, American always create those new style for other people in other countries. So
Yeah.
once we follow you, you tell us that you are wrong.
Yeah, yeah. We exported it to India and Africa, and we've destroyed their agriculture system. They're fighting against American help right now. They don't want our GMOs. They don't want our chemical fertilizers. They don't want our seeds. They don't want anything from us. Yeah.
So I'm curious then, is your vision of, like, I mean, not just American, but the future in general, of an agrarian society where we all live on individualist farms with maybe the largest metropolitan centers being in Charlottesville, where cities, because you can't farm directly in the cities with the soil, are therefore unsustainable, so that has to be the model.
Yeah. I think that the actual model of I think the population of the world is going to shrink by an order of magnitude. If you look at any system, you can't have the apex being occupy so much of the resource. It has to be a pyramid. It can't be an inverted pyramid the way it is today, with the guys at the top consuming all the resources. It'll collapse, and I think that is going to happen. Long-term sustainability on the planet, I think, is the agrarian city-state. So you have a center city, and I don't know what the numbers are, but maybe it's 10,000, 50,000 people in a city, and then around that you have a green belt that's actually supplying that city, and if 50 miles or 100 miles, I don't know what the radius is that works. The models that I think are coming back that are showing great promise are what Prince Charles is doing in the UK, recreating villages that are self-sustaining, that have all different social classes and workers living together, and in those societies naturally you can't have the disparity of wealth that we have in a global society, because you live with the person. You might have a lot more capital, you own a lot of land, but you can't live a lifestyle that is so far beyond the others that are next to you, otherwise there'll be a revolution. So yes, I think we go back to, I don't think the days of the New Yorks of the world, the Londons, the Parises of the world, I think those days will go. There may still be some of those cities that are able to continue it long enough because they have some monopolistic control over the supply of money or some other advantage, but I don't think those are lasting.
I guess I just argue there are a lot of uses and a lot of value in having a mixed-use city where you have space that is shared between residential and commercial shops. You have a lot of density in that, and that reduces the amount of energy you have to use, allows people to walk, allows people to live kind of healthier, more contained lifestyles, the way you see often in New York, and to some degree Charlottesville as well. So I mean, I feel like there's got to be some sort of trade-off for it, because everyone lives. I mean, I guess you're saying there are the city-states, but the city is still kind of dispersed and kind of village-like, then it means that you're still going to have huge energy costs in terms of getting around, huge challenges of people being spread out, and that's going to create some kind of social fragmentation as a result of that.
Yeah, I think clearly commuting, the concept of commuting is idiotic.
Part of what I see as being a problem with that.
I don't think you'll have commuting, and that's, I mean, come back to this issue of the market and Charlottesville's objective to have a new market space. The fact that they could even think about having a farmer's market 7 days a week is idiotic. First of all, farmers have to farm. They can't go to market 7 days a week. Number two is, people are only going to buy so much food. So if you have it 7 days a week, that means every day they buy 1/7 of what they would buy if they bought it all on Saturday morning or Wednesday, right? And it means you're going to have to commute that product 7 times more. So the whole concept flies in the face of what I think is a sustainable. If you look at the old city-states, there was a market day. There was a day when it made sense to bring things into the city center. And the cities, there was a reason that laundry was done on Mondays, that, you know, maids had Thursdays off. These social structures were built around a lifestyle that was local. And I think as that comes back, you're going to see things like commuting go away. Yeah.
So you brought up a lot of subversive ideas. I was kind of wondering, on a more personal note, if these are things that led you into farming, or ideas and knowledge that you compiled from being in the farm?
Yeah, it's both. I got into farming by accident. I grew up in New England, spent every waking moment I could in the mountains, and sailing and hiking and swimming and being out of a building. And when I went through college, you know, we all take, you know, Yogi Berra says, when you see a fork, take it. You have to make decisions, and I had a decision to either go work for Jacques Cousteau or go into business. And business paid a lot, and this didn't pay anything. And I went into business. And the whole time I was in business, I loved it. And it's like any kind of competition and fight. I mean, guys like competition for whatever reason, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. But as I say, I always felt I was missing what I really wanted to do. And I filled it by pretending, going on the weekends, and I had horses, so I'd be out riding horses on the weekends, and one thing led to another, and I said, well, I've got horses, I need to have something to mow the grass here, I'll get some cattle, and got the cattle, and then I said, well, I've got the lawnmower, maybe I can eat it at the end of the winter, at the end of the summer, instead of feed it through the winter. Beef wasn't so good, so then I said I needed to get cows. And then I said, boy, there's something really here. I view myself as a radical environmentalist, but I didn't think that going and blowing up, you know, petroleum refineries or picketing outside of nuclear plants was really what I wanted to do. I didn't think it would really make a difference. But I thought that farming might. And the last 15 years really it's been a combination of experiencing it. It's been an education, so I've evolved my thinking as I've gone through it. Reading different people. Have you ever read any of Wendell Berry's work?
I was actually going to bring that up because you were talking about being connected to your food.
Well,
yeah, that article.
I met Wendell, well, I met when I was a small boy. I was stealing oysters off of a person's property up in Connecticut. She called me up to her house to find out what I was doing. And I said I was harvesting oysters. And she said, are you going to eat those? And I said, yes. And she said, all right, well, that's fine. As long as you're going to eat them, that's fine. She said, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine. She introduced me to Rachel Carson.
No way.
What?
It was Andy Seaton, whose father launched with Baden Powell, the Boy Scouts in the U.S., and gave the reservation that we all went to when we were kids. And the two of them were sitting there, and so of course, they said I had to read Silent Spring, so I did. And they wanted me to come back and tell them what I thought about this, and then I told them what I thought. I was 8 or 7 at the time. And then they said, you know, there's a guy that is in New York that you really need to meet. Wendell Berry. Well, I never met him, and I met him about 10 years ago. Incredible. What Wendell Berry, when I read Wendell Berry, he's talking to me. He's writing about me, and Yeah, I think it's a combination of I set out to do something, but it's morphed and evolved as I've gone. I've exhausted you. Great. Well, thank you all very much. And if you didn't